Good afternoon, everybody. Can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cabinet Committee for Regeneration on Thursday, the 8th of February, from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 1 minute past 2. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Cabinet Member for Asset Management. This meeting is being live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Can everyone ensure that mobile phones are either on silent or switched off? And can I remind members to use their microphones so that they can be heard on YouTube? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome members of the public to the meeting? This morning, we will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first item of business is apologies for absence. I don't believe I have any apologies for absence. The second item is disclosures of interest. I need to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of the County Council. Are there any other interests that need to be declared? I had a request from Councillor Lee to speak on items 7 and 8, but unfortunately he is unable to attend. He has raised some issues, and I will seek to ensure that they are touched on during the meeting as appropriate. But I also have a piece of public participation where we have Mr. Baker here from the City of Winchester Trust, who I believe wishes to speak on item 8, which is Central Winchester Regeneration. Is that correct? Yeah. Well, I'll call you forward when we get to that particular agenda item, unless you want to speak now. No. Okay. The next item of business is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 4th of October 2023. Can I ask fellow Cabinet members if you agree those minutes as a correct record? Great. The next item after that is Chair's announcements. I have no announcements. I think everything I might want to say is covered in the presentations coming up. And so item 7 is the Station Approach Project Update. The presentation's on pages 9 to 30 of the document pack. But Mr. Bakey, would you like to take us through this presentation?
Thank you, Chair. People remember the last time the committee met, we were in the middle of a procurement exercise for a design team to undertake concept master plan for the station approach sites. We had 16 teams bid for it, and I'm pleased to say Design Engine were then appointed. They are looking at the sites that are on the plan, numbered 1 to 5, as I'm sure everybody remembers, and also importantly, looking at the green areas on that plan, the spaces between the actual sites themselves. So that was a slight update from previous work that's been done. Since Design Engine have been appointed, they produced a baseline analysis, which was then presented to the project board 2 weeks ago. The next steps are looking at some of the options and engaging in a series of stakeholder workshops in the early part of March, leading into a wider public engagement plan for early summer 2024. This is just to remind people of the journey we've been on and where we are now in terms of moving into spring summer 24. We will do some member engagement post-elections. There's an all-member briefing being set up for the 22nd of May on station approach to give an indication to members of some of the options for the sites and also a lead into the actual public participation work that's currently scheduled in late June. I'd like to hand over to Richard Jobson, and Oliver Moore from Design Engine. They have produced a presentation for you to introduce their wider team, because there's more consultants than just Design Engine. But they will give you an update on who the rest of their team is, but also an indication of the work that they've done historically in Winchester City.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Richard Jobson, founding director of Design Engine Architects, and I'm here with my colleague Oliver Moore, who's obviously helping with this particular project. As Ken said, we're supported by a strong team of other consultants, which we've worked with previously before on other developments around the region of Hampshire and beyond. And that includes new master planning, urban movement, who are dealing with transport and active travel, Arups, who are dealing with sustainability, transport, etc., and also Stephen B, heritage and planning, and Ollie will give a little bit more background to them later on in the presentation. In terms of the practice, Design Engine started in 2000. And I was previously a director with another fellow director, Richard Casemore, for another Winchester practice called Plinking and Browning, or now called Architecture PLB. We currently have a practice of about 35 people in Winchester, London, and in Exeter. We're very proud of the awards that we've won over the last 20 years, in excess of 60, 20 RIBA awards and Civic Trust awards. Sorry, that plan's quite faint on the projection here, but this is a plan of Winchester, and it just highlights the projects that myself has been involved in over the last nearly 30 odd years. I actually came to Winchester in 1988 as a young architect, and we worked on numerous projects, which I thought would be helpful just for the panel to see in terms of the sort of breadth of our work. Starting with the work that we did at the School of Art campus for Southampton University, was actually an independent art school back when we actually developed the campus there. I was a director at PLB when I developed these buildings with Richard Casement at the time, back in the early 90s. And hopefully that kind of it's been an interesting place to watch over the years, and there's obviously still potential there to be developed as well. And I understand Southampton are currently looking to develop that further into the future. I was also involved as a young architect with the development plans concept work for the Cathedral Visitor Centre. It's always quite nice to go and see how popular that project is, and how it's been a great asset to the Cathedral of Winchester, and really supports obviously both local and tourism in the region. And at a much smaller scale, and actually more pertinent in many ways to what we might be looking at in terms of the development of the Station Approach project, is more integrated urban schemes that we've done within the city itself. This is the project that I led on as a project architect for, which is called Walcott Chambers, which was a redevelopment of what was at the time a private house. It was the last garden actually on the central high street in Winchester in the late 80s, and we redeveloped the building itself, and the sort of smaller, which now is sort of the fabric shop, and the larger sort of office building to the rear. And actually, one of the proudest elements of that is non-architectural. It's actually the planting of the large plane tree, which we planted in 1990. It's quite a small tree at the time, but it's obviously a magnificent specimen as you walk up the high street today. So it's actually something to be really proud of. More currently, we're just finishing off a long project for Winchester College, which has been a very significant building for them. In fact, it's the largest building that they've ever built as a school, even since their inception. It's a project that's due to complete this summer. It's for new sports facilities, including swimming pools, fives courts. So a massive asset to the college itself, but also will be used by the community as well. So something that, again, hopefully people will start to see eventually the hoardings coming down in the next few months. And then even more recently completed, for those people that drive up and down Romsey Road, they'll have noticed the large new university project that's been completed there. A project that took nearly 9 years in development with the university. It was something that they were very keen to deliver on a very sensitive and difficult site. A project they really wanted to invest in something which celebrated education in the city, and actually really celebrate the value of the university, and Winchester University in particular. And therefore the building was very much directed about the idea of trying to celebrate those elements, but also pick materiality and elements within Winchester City itself. So sort of dragging the values of the city up the sort of hill up Romsey Road, which we felt was very successful. Connected with that project was a sort of a real passion of the company, which is about sustainability and trying to improve, obviously, the places that we live and work in. And therefore, in the centre of this building, something that you're not aware of when you drive past it or walk past it, is a beautiful central water garden, which supports a real diversity of biodiversity elements within it. And then also for the University of Winchester, some other projects down on their site itself, which is the King Alfred campus, which involved works from existing buildings, 1960s buildings that we worked with to renovate. And this particular image actually shows the St Alfred's project, which is a new teaching building, which actually saved the 1960s building on its right. And also we were commissioned for the artwork as well. So it's about sort of art and architecture sort of coming together to create a new campus, and something which I think again was celebration of the values of the university. It saw the university transform from effectively a teaching college into a full-blown university. At the more sensitive level, we've also worked on the Winton Chapel, which is a conversion of their very tired Victorian building, which actually completely re-internalised the space to make it a sort of a place that was sort of celebration of religion. And it was again something that was very passionate to both the university and ourselves. And then finally, Chesil Lodge, which is on Chesil Street, significant large building, extra care. We worked as the planning architects for this, and to try and produce a building which we felt would be sensitive to Chesil Street itself, but also obviously meet the requirements of the brief. And again, now that that building's settling in with the landscape, we think it's been a very successful addition to the entrance to the city. If I'm just going to hand over now to Oliver Moore, who's just going to talk you through the consultants that we're working with and obviously their qualities. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So my name's Oliver. I'm going to introduce and touch on some of the collaborations with our other partners who make up this team for Station Approach, and I'll pick a couple of projects here that we shared in the interview process, which show some of the projects that we've worked on and tasks that we've tackled in an urban sense, which I think will be relevant to the Station Approach project. So this is Andover Master Plan, in which we collaborated with New Master Planning. They're based in Bournemouth, so another local team. We worked with them and with Urban Movement on the next slide as well for Test Valley Borough Council between 2021 and 2023. The master plan for that was the city centre regeneration. There was elements of public space, routes, permeability, mixed uses all around the town centre, retail and leisure areas, and there was also an education college there. The master plan was endorsed in 2022 and is now being delivered through some early projects that are coming forward in Andover through levelling up funding that's been approved for the theatre there, and some public realm projects that are happening on the ground. This next slide, Urban Movement, is oh sorry, back one. They came on board through that master plan process, and they actually delivered some detailed studies looking at the reallocation and redesign of public realm space and the different ways that different transport modes can be supported, and transport, in particular car traffic, can be manoeuvred around Andover city centre to provide a better place for walking, cycling and spaces for the public to sit and dwell. I think elements that will be important in the station approach and creating a better sense and identity of place within the cities. And the next slide is Arup. I mean, they're a national, internationally known engineering firm. They have excellent experience across a number of sites for rail station and transport infrastructure, and also expertise in sustainability modelling and design, and that they'll be supporting us on those elements. And the last slide for our team, Stephen B. He's a practitioner who has a long history in Winchester, now a specialist in historic building and heritage character assessment in townscape terms. He's formerly Winchester Director of Planning and Development at Winchester City Council, also an ex-board member of English Heritage, so excellent credentials in terms of commenting on the historic landscape and townscape. And so the site itself, this is one of our just schematic sketches, if you like, of the elements that make up the station approach site, which includes, I don't know if I can get the cursor to work here. We've got the station itself in orange and yellow there. We've got the Carfax site here with the Records Office, the most prominent building on it, around the Carfax junction. We've got the cattle market area here with the Conservative Club, and it's predominantly a car park. And then there's car parks related to the station itself, both on the west and on the east, adjoining the new student residences that were built there just a couple of years ago. And there's also a site here, it's worth mentioning, falls within the remit of the scheme, which is the known as the DIO site, which is part of this scheme. So what have we been doing? We were appointed in November, and up until now we've been surveying the site, we've been walking the ground. Incidentally, our office is only just at the top of this screen here, so we're very, very local. We use the site, myself and the rest of the practice members, on an almost daily basis, moving through and to work and lunch, etc. We've been doing a lot of background information gathering and consulting with the various officers at Winchester and Hampshire to understand the policy context in which this scheme will need to come forward, and the ideas will need to be married between the needs of the site, the needs of the public, and the direction of policy. And just to finish, I think our initial kind of thinking for this site, I think our ambition is to turn it from somewhere which you travel through and arrive in to actually becoming a place, and a place for connecting, and that works on a number of levels: connecting existing transport routes, new modes of moving to and around and through the site, a place to connect to work, to play, for connect to nature, what elements are there, and how can we improve the biodiversity within our urban centres, connections for neighbourhoods, existing communities, new communities, transforming the site from a place to park cars predominantly, and movement to a place for culture and events, an identity, a place, a waymarker through the city, and connecting Winchester to cities and destinations within the city and beyond. That's us. So thanks for listening, and as Ken said, listen for more opportunities to get involved through the public consultations, which will be in the summer, and some focused workshops with local interest groups, which will be advertising shortly in March.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, fellow councillors, does anybody have any questions you would like to ask Ken or Richard or whatever? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Yes, you're probably aware that around the station there's a lot going on at the moment, with bollards being put up, there's concrete blocks, etc. The trees are being fenced off, and I just wonder what interaction you will be having with Network Rail and South Western trains throughout this process, because obviously the whole area needs to work. And at the moment, it's kind of not working anyway. I just wonder what your plans were.
If I start off and then maybe bring in Richard and Oliver. So Network Rail, although not looking immediately to develop their sites, are still part of the project team. They're still coming to the meetings. So they're there for a dialogue. We have a dialogue with South Western Railway. And I think the area that you've referred to, Councillor Thompson, that whole public realm, the forecourt of the station, is a key part of the work that these gentlemen are going to be looking at. And hopefully we can resolve the paving issues and the trees that are causing the problems. But I will leave it and let Richard and Oliver talk a bit more about some of the thinking around that they've got around how does that whole forecourt work.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I mean, I think for us, the arrival approach coming from the station and finding the routes through into the centre is going to be absolutely key to how this place functions as transport interchange and as a gateway to Winchester. We're aware of the conversations that South West Rail and Network Rail have had about the existing trees and the paving. It's, to be clear, we're commissioned for a concept master plan, which is to set the direction for the regeneration in the long term for this area. So I think the best we can do is informing that vision might help inform South West Rail and Network Rail is what they do in the short term. I would very much hope that these paving issues will be sorted out long before the concept master plan becomes a reality.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, you said the next engagement is going to be over the summer. I'm not sure how long it is since the last, and I wondered whether anything was possible pre-election period. Where I'm looking at you, but maybe I should be looking at you.
Councillor, maybe I didn't make myself clear. So there are 4 workshops with stakeholders pre-election, so they will be going out shortly to invite an invited group of stakeholders. The public consultation will be much wider, going on after this committee actually in June. It will begin after that. So,
Councillor Promotion.
Thank you. Just wondering if you could enlarge a bit more in terms of it being a connecting places and talk a little bit about your ideas around being a transport hub, but particularly for sustainable transport, starting with walking and then cycling and then buses, and what you see as the potential role there within the work you're doing to encourage more of sustainable travel rather than the, drive there, be dropped off, come back, be picked up and all the rest of it, sort of try and encouraging a bit more sustainable travel. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's something that I'm not sure we can answer that now, because I think truly that will come out of the design and consultation process that is due to happen over the coming months. Only to say really at this point that it's very much part of the brief. We're aware of the Winchester Movement Strategy and other policies and the aims of reducing traffic and improving space for walking and cycling in Winchester, as in many cities around the UK. So that's the context in which we go into those consultations with. But equally, we'll be, listening to the officers, understanding the policies, and also the local interest groups, which will be engaging, who represent those very interests that you just mentioned.
Godfrey.
Thank you so much. Last year we had the Regeneration capacity study, which looked at what was possible on each site, and that included some preferences expressed in this forum last year. How's that been? How's the capacity study results being taken forward into the consultation and presumably into a concept master plan? What sort of constraints or expectations will you be presenting to the stakeholders?
Yeah, we're aware of obviously the previous documents by Howard Tompkins. They're part of the baseline study that we've been currently working on and understanding what those outcomes are. I think we're looking at those and trying to understand how those particular documents fit within the broader sort of conversation we're now having about other things to do with obviously transport issues, biodiversity issues. So we need to look at those closely and understand how we can actually make those work and develop those. I mean, at the end of the day, those things were effectively sort of capacity studies. They're not kind of creating spaces or places. They're not kind of buildings as such. They're just looking at you've got a plot of land, how much you can get on it. I think what our job is to try and understand that level of capacity and understand all the other layers that you need to put on top of that to actually come out with something that needs a sort of a more workable master plan diagram drawings. So that's what our job is over the next year nearly, following the consultation process, of which hopefully we'll be able to give you guidance on what we think is the best solution for this area. And so we obviously have all that information, and we'll obviously be using it as a sort of a way of helping us understand what was done before and how we can move that project forward. Dr. Morrison.
Thank you. If I could just move into a different direction. So in your slides, you've got the snake type of timeline, kind of outlining an overall plan. Now, I think this committee is due to meet in June. So what I'm really looking at here is to better understand what are the interim milestones from your perspective, and what are you going to be bringing back for discussion, comment, the approval to this committee, and at what milestones, so we kind of have a sense of what to expect next time, and we can gauge to some extent whether whether we're on track, ahead of track, whatever. Perhaps tracks is the wrong phrase to be using in this context.
Almost sounds the perfect answer there. So I think, as I said earlier, we've got a briefing post-election for the 22nd of May for all members to be briefed on the station approach, and that will be with Design Engine showing the results of their work, having had their 4 workshops with key stakeholders prior to the election. They will then be continuing to work on looking at each of the sites and pulling that together and then presenting that to members. We already have an approval to go out for public consultation, but we all clearly want to share that public consultation material with you at the next meeting in June of this committee. That then leads us on to a public consultation exercise for 6 weeks over the summer, and then we will be bringing the results of that back to the committee in the autumn. That will give you another chance at that point to have some final comments. Before then, we'll bring the concept master plan, will then get taken forward to Cabinet by our planning colleagues for endorsement as per the usual arrangements for concept master plans.
Any further questions from anybody other than me? Right, here we go. I've got 2 questions I'm quite interested in following up on. And one of them, to be fair, is a question that's a sort of distillation of a page of A4, which I had from Councillor Lee to a question, which is, first question is, how are you working to join this up on other citywide transport issues, with the movement strategy, with what's going in central Winchester, so that we have joined up view, particularly if we're looking at the question of connecting? So that's question number 1. And question number 2, I've heard indirectly, from, I don't know how we call it, planning and redevelopment, regeneration gossip, that they've historically taken quite an innovative and engaging approach in Andover. So I was quite interested that you referenced that, and I just wondered if there are things we can learn from how they've done there, what they did there, that we will be thinking of reapplying to how we think about and how we work in Winchester.
And I take the first point, and you can absolutely amplify it as well. And Leader, you've heard me say this before, we do have a meeting to be set up between the 2 respective design teams for Station Approach and for Central Winchester. That it's due to happen, I'm told, and that will be with Hampshire County Council. We understand, and both teams understand, how important it is that they hear from each other about the opportunities, the constraints, and also what is the art of the possible in terms of public transport provision, movement, active travel across and between both projects. So that's absolutely in the diary, due to happen before the end of March, because actually somebody from the Jigsaw team is on leave in March, so we have to get that in quite quickly. I'll let these gentlemen answer the rest of it, and I'll amplify that point as well if you want to.
I'll try and address the second point, but bearing in mind this isn't a presentation about Andover Town Centre, I would say that the team that worked on that project, there's a number of issues and skill sets that we'll bring to bear on station approach, but also it's the differences between the two sites and the two problems there. So there are different challenges in Andover. It's a high street site there. It is the very heart of Andover there, around the retail shopping centre that was failing. So it would be kind of out of place for me to talk about some of the learnings from that scheme, because they don't necessarily map across to the station approach regeneration problems in Winchester that we're tackling. Just to say that those elements of urban placemaking and public realm, and particularly the routes. So, for example, in Andover, some of the vehicular routes that sort of cut off and sever some of the movements around and into the city centre, I can see parallels there with some of the ways that transport moves around the station approach area. And so that's something that we'll be taking, learnings from the Andover project into the station approach.
Probably not, except obviously it's difficult to compare cities with different cities or towns. As Ollie said, Andover was a failing town centre, and it had a very difficult shopping centre that needs to be removed and replaced. They've done certain radical things, the relocation of the theatre, things like this, to try and bring sort of life back into the high street. And elements of that are important within station approach. I think the difficulty with station approach is how do you bring life into that part of the city and avoid it just being a sort of place you walk through. So what do you bring to it beyond housing and offices? Is there ways that we can sort of sweat that space harder and make it a space where you might go there as a destination, not just a place to either work or live? And I think that's the sort of areas that we want to sort of, in a sense, tease out with the consultation process and see whether there's a way of doing that within this particular area. These are two large sites, and one of them is obviously the gateway to the city. So I think there are bits about trying to think, hate the word outside the box, or be radical about what we might try and do here. So none of those things we're disguising, we're trying to embrace. But obviously we're trying to go through this process of consultation and understand everybody's particular sort of loves and hates about the sites, and then understand whether we can then come to a way of presenting back to the city something which is maybe a different way of thinking about that place, which is station approach, which we're all now rather familiar with, but probably not in a good way. We want to try and change it into a place that's maybe we're familiar with in a good way, something that maybe the city is more proud of than it is currently. And I think they're challenging. I mean, let's be honest, it's not easy, and something that's going to have to be done there to make it change. And I think that's going to be a collective effort. I don't think it just comes down to us putting something on a master plan. I think it's a collective will to make station approach and Carfax and the cattle market site become a great asset to the city. I think as designers, confident we can do that, but we just need obviously everybody collectively to join in that journey. And that's what's happened at Andover. I think it was a massively joined up and a very positive way of trying to develop that town centre, which was effectively failing on its feet and had been for many years, unlike Winchester, which isn't the same.
Very helpful. And I think towards the end there, you sort of captured what I was particularly looking for, which wasn't so much I fully recognise that Andover and Winchester are very different places. But I was interested in the sort of commonalities of what it takes to get that kind of quality of design, sensitivity of design to place, imagination of design as needed to solve the challenges in front of you. And I think you started to touch on that in the end. I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, but otherwise your answer was very helpful. Any other comments or any questions? We are, the theory of this is that we are noting the paper, but in theory at this point we can have any debate that might be needed ahead of noting, but I don't know if that's feels appropriate to people. Somebody wants to make any comments? I think it's been more about understanding the work that's underway, but if somebody wants to say something, they feel free. No? Okay, otherwise, thank you very much indeed for coming along. We're very excited to have such an eminent local practice involved in the work, and people who, dare I say it, by their very location are going to care about what happens and make sure, you know, if we look at the record of your work, the one thing we can absolutely bank and take for granted is that you care about this city and that you are ambitious for this city and how we move it forward in a way that's sensitive to its history, but that we do move it forward. I like the idea of thinking about it as a place to connect, and very grateful for you for coming along today, for the work that's already underway, and I'm excited to see the outcome of what comes next. And as you say, it will be a common effort to drive the kind of excitement and improvement that we are looking forward to, and I look forward to that common endeavour. So thank you very much indeed for coming, and we will I'll ask Cabinet to note the paper, which I'm sure you will. Yep. And we'll move on to the next item of business, but thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
So the next item of business is the Central Winchester Regeneration Project update. The way we will do this is we will have the presentation, introduction, the presentation. I think we then have a chance for Mr. Baker to make his comments and raise any questions that he may have, and then answer those questions, and then Cabinet and Councillor colleagues have the chance to ask their own questions. But if we could start with the team taking us through the presentation. Slides. I have now muted everybody with my second button. Only I have.
I have to confess, I think that might have been me, Chair. Apologies. So yes, thank you for the introduction there. We're going to give you a bit of an update now on how the Central Winchester project has progressed and what the next steps are. Touch on where we're at with the Friarsgate Medical Centre. We've got Tracy Matthews, our archaeologist, here to go through some of the archaeology slides, and we also have our development partner Jigsaw here with us today as well to take you through what they've been up to since the last time we were here at Regen Committee. So here are some, actually now some of them are out of date photos of where we got to with Friarsgate, and for those eagle-eyed and not so eagle-eyed amongst, it's practically gone now. There is a pile of spoil left, but substantially the building has come down. We have been a little bit, the odd week or so, slightly behind schedule, but nothing untoward. I think there was some theft from site early on, and I think there is just one other small, I think there's been another unexpected electricity connection found this past couple of days. So we're on track for it coming down definitely by the end of February. So the programme itself is not being held up in any way. We are also on the cusp of awarding the next stage, because for those of you that have followed this, we want to put the interim space there, which involves some landscaping. So once the site is actually cleared of all the spoil and the rubble, the hard landscaping will be undertaken. Contract for that is about to be awarded, and again they are looking to start on site towards the end of February, with a view to, you can see the timings here, March to May actual work. And straight off the back of that, there will be the soft landscaping, which we're talking there around trees and planters and seating, etc. And I know the estates team are already working hard on pulling together the brief for that and making sure that the soft landscaping follows hard on the heels of the hard landscaping. We're also liaising with the archaeologists that are currently working on the site, PCA, on the trenching work that the council has carried out, which Tracy's going to talk about in a little while. But we're also looking to speak to PCA to talk to them about the final stages of the Friarsgate site, which is bringing the site to life through engagement around archaeology. We're looking at bringing in some of the arts groups, some of the culture groups, to try and make it a bit of a focal point throughout the period that it's going to be a meanwhile use. Again, working with our partners Jigsaw to understand how they also might be involved in that, including their engagement and upping the profile of the whole project through what we do on that particular site at Friarsgate. So slightly behind with the demolition, but nothing untoward, and we are still on track to have the site activated and engaging by the summer of this year. So that's really exciting. With regards to the other key element that the council is doing ahead of the main project, which Jigsaw are helping us with, obviously, is how we are getting on with the trenching works and the excavations which PCA are currently doing on the bus station. So we've got Tracy with us this afternoon, who's going to talk us through the next few slides. To obviously knows far more about archaeology than I do.
Good afternoon, leader, councillors and members of the public here and those viewing online. As Vernon has outlined, I'm here to just present some of the initial results and findings from the archaeological work that's currently underway on site, finishing soon. So as you know, a previous Regeneration Cabinet in February last year approved the funding to progress evaluation trenching on the site. Pre-construct archaeology were appointed to undertake this work following a rigorous procurement process. So the project aims were obviously to find out more. We don't know a lot about this area. There's a lot of reconstruction of street plans, town layout in the Roman, late Saxon and medieval period, but there's been very little archaeological investigation in this area of any date. So it's really an unknown area. And in parallel, we wanted to undertake a big wide programme of public engagement activities and events, bringing the site and the work that has been undertaken to a wider audience. And if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the project, as you know, entailed 4 trenches, big trenches, deep trenches, which had been formed by the previous borehole project undertaken in 2020-21. It was a research-driven project. Like I said, we have very little key and detailed information on this area. We were testing a lot of questions through this project, trying to understand more about the Roman, the late Saxon and the medieval townscape. In the wider sense, individual buildings, if we could locate them, streets, lost lanes, tying that very much into the medieval documentary evidence, of which there's extensive work undertaken by the Winchester Research Unit and published by the Winchester Excavations Committee, Martin Biddle's group. And obviously through all of the finds and samples, really increasing our understanding of life and activity across this area. So as you can see from these photos, it's been a complex engineering project in as much as an archaeological project. Big machines, huge trench box systems to, sorry if we just could go back a bit. Thank you. very big box trench systems to ensure the safety and stability of the trenches, both for the ground and also for the archaeologists in the trenches. Water management has been an issue, and you know, we've managed to get that working, but there's all sorts of health and safety issues, confined spaces, gas monitoring for the people in the trench. Whole processes and procedures had to be planned out in the event that one of the PCA personnel was injured or sick and had to be lifted out of the trench in the sort of, you've seen them sort of Coast Guard rescue baskets sort of scenarios. That's all on site ready just in case. So it's been a very complex project, notwithstanding before we even got into the ground. So what did we find? Slide, please. These photos illustrate some of the things that we've found and identified and understood so far. Up at the top left of the screen, we've got the trench that was to the west of Tanner Street in the Coitbury House car park. Here we identified, what you can see in that photograph is the late 19th century alleyway surface that's documented on historic OS maps. Below that, and you can see in the photograph to the right, we had two phases of a medieval building which would have fronted onto Tanner Street. Floor surface within that, and to the east of the building, which is the left of the photograph, we've had a sort of cobbled surface, which suggests that it's a yard outside of structures. Below that, which can be seen in the bottom central photograph, we've had a sort of a chalk and flint layer, which perhaps is a capping layer above very black, deep, silty deposits, which are very fine grained in terms of their nature, which suggests they're water lane. The photograph here shows some pre-construct archaeologists sampling that deposit, and we'll find out more about its character and what it means in terms of what happened below before the medieval period in due course. The photograph on the bottom left is one of the trenches within the main bus station area, our trench 3, and that there you can see is an area where there's sort of small areas of tiles towards the top of the archaeological surface there. Those are Roman tiles, but they are reused. So we are looking at remains of probably a late Saxon to early medieval building at that point. Above all of that, so below all of that, we've got a sort of fairly thick 30 to 40 centimetre thick organic layer, lots of twigs and bits of wood, lots of animal bone coming from it. And that, we think at this stage, we know from the boreholes that deposit dates to the late Saxon period, early Middle Saxon period, and it likely represents reversion to the floodplain following the sort of breakdown of the Roman administration and maintenance of a Roman water management system in this area. So it's become a swamp again. And on the right hand side, the larger photograph, that is the trench which is immediately south of the Friarsgate Medical Centre site. And here we have a revetment structure which is formed by timber posts. They're actually just tree trunks driven into the ground, sort of bound together by horizontal timbers. And behind that, and as part of the construction of this revetment, we have a sort of large dump of materials and soils. Lots of finds coming out of that material. The upper parts seem to be medieval, but the lower parts seem to be producing earlier, perhaps Saxo-Norman artifacts. And you can see right at the base of that, next to the archaeologist, is another timber where you can see a hole in it, and that is a reused structural timber. Now, our current thinking is based on evidence from what this structure is a revetment to probably an early incarnation of the brook, the lower brook that passes through this site. Currently, it sort of wends its way underground in a culvert and then to the east of the bus station site as an open watercourse. This, we think, is an earlier incarnation of the brook. Evidence from similar waterfront sites in London apparently look at this type of construction as 9th century. However, the artifacts certainly within that dump supporting the revetment to the rear of it is suggesting slightly later date. The fact that we've got an earlier reused timber integral into the construction of this might suggest that there's an earlier phase of structures on the site and that timber's come from that and been reused in this medieval period. We might be slightly behind the times in terms of construction techniques, perhaps here in Winchester. We've been able to recover some of the timbers from that revetment, and as part of the post-excavation work, PCA and their specialists will be looking at species identification and dendrochronological dating, ring dating as well. So we'll hopefully get a good date for that structure. We can move on to the next slide. And these three photographs really show some of the complexity and difficulties in evaluating this site. The photograph on the left, I mean, they all show there's a lot of mud and water that needs to be managed daily. I mean, basically the trenches flood every day and they have to be pumped before the archaeologists can get back in there, get back to where they were yesterday and then move on ahead. So it's a slow process. If you, in the photograph on the left, to the left of the archaeologist is a pit, which is a later pit that's been cut through earlier stratigraphy. And in the middle of that water-filled pit, you can sort of see this sort of triangle of, it's a wooden post, effectively. And that feature, that piece of timber is in the right-hand photograph, at the centre top of the trench, the same post, but they've archaeologists have gone down below, and this is now showing remains of a Roman timber structure or buildings, plural. We think possibly some of these elements represent drains. We have wooden drains from other archaeological sites in Winchester, and so we have our first confirmation of Roman archaeology on this site in those trenches. Lots and lots of finds, so if we can move to the next slide. Lots of material culture, lots of pottery, lots and lots of animal bone. The centre top photograph is actually a pig mandible, but what's interesting on that is it's showing lots of cut marks, so it's evidence of butchery. People are processing meat on the site and disposing of it within the site. We've also got at the top right is what is a crucible. That's evidence of metalworking. I don't yet know if we know what type of metalworking, but hopefully there'll be some residues within the crucible that'll tell us exactly what they were working with. Below that, there's a whetstone, a small lace tag, I think that was, clay pipe, so what people were casually losing from their prized possessions, perhaps. Pottery, lots and lots of animal bone, and top right is a part of a sculpture. Now, preliminary assessment of that by a specialist suggests that is a very important 12th century Romanesque sculpture. There's traces of paint, which will be further analysed. The way it's carved and the position of there's a hole in the top, and where the mouth would have been, it's possible that this was a gargoyle from a significant building, presumably on the site somewhere in the locality of where it was found. If we can move on to the next slide. Like we said, public engagement around this project has been a very fundamental part of this project from the outset. We've had significant partnership between the council, Pre-Construct Archaeology and the University of Winchester to deliver this. We've had extensive programmes of volunteer activities, both up at the university, where volunteers had been helping to process some of the early environmental samples, and also in the offices of Pre-Construct Archaeology, washing the finds, and just getting to handle some of the material that's coming out of the site. We've had some fantastic feedback from the volunteers, who have come from far and wide, as well as the immediate locality. I think an American tourist came and volunteered for 4 weeks because they were staying in the locality. I presume they were on an extended family visit or something, and they volunteered and had a fantastic time. And it's been great. And that programme has been extended twice by Pre-Construct due to the success of that programme, and that's ongoing currently as well now. We've had 4 open days, which have been highly successful, both for general public, involving tours of the site and the trenches, opportunities to see and handle some of the finds and information, which were held in Abbey Gardens. Pre-Construct also had an invited group from the local Beavers group and Cubs groups who had a special tour and activities set up for them. Yeah, and lots of information on Pre-Construct's website and our own website. Friday finds, some of the special things that have been found from the site have featured on their website too. So I think it's been hugely successful. The next slide. And the next steps. I said the work's ongoing because it is ongoing still. We are slightly delayed in completing the work. 3 out of the 4 trenches have been completed and they have been backfilled, ready for reinstatement. The 4th trench is well underway, and we have agreed exactly what the next steps will happen within that trench. And we have an end date scheduled for the end of the week commencing the 19th of February. We are in February, aren't we? Yes. So that will then be completed, and then there's a 2-week period allowed for backfilling, decanting from site and vacating the site, removing all the equipment, site accommodation, etc. That the delays have largely been down to a combination of factors, just the complexity and sort of slog sometimes of opening the trenches up each day. Water management, we had some delays with the Environment Agency agreement process due to delays in their handling of paperwork through last summer. They were just extremely busy, and it meant that something that should have been hopefully agreed within 20 days took much longer, but that delayed opening some of the trenches on the main bus station site. Pre-Construct Archaeology, unfortunately, have had cases of COVID through the autumn and winter, which has obviously knocked out key personnel at times. And obviously, we've had a number of severe weather events through the autumn and winter, which has brought its own challenges in terms of water management and etc. There have been no cost implications to this because although the programme has been delayed or it's extended, what that's meant is that each trench has been delayed, but the overall time of uncosted staff time by Pre-Construct has not increased. So that's where we are with that. Following Pre-Construct leaving the site, they'll be entering what's we call the post-excavation stage. That's where all of the finds will continue to be processed. By that I mean washing the finds, processing the environmental samples to recover all the seeds, etc. We'll receive an interim report, which is due 1 month after the completion of the field work. Probably won't say much more than I've kind of alluded to today, but with more detail. And then they'll commence work with the specialists looking at all of the categories of finds and artefacts and the samples. That will all be correlated across all of the careful site records and drawings made during the project. And that will then all be brought together and create the story of the site and the story of those trenches and how they can enhance our understanding of that part of Winchester. We'll then receive that report. We'll certainly be looking at integrating that fully with the previous borehole results, and our plan is then that at some point we will then have another public panel session where we'll present a very detailed picture of the archaeology, which will be in a public forum so that everybody can hear much more about this fantastic site. And as Varian has alluded to already, there's further project work which will form part of the interim use of the Friarsgate Medical Centre site. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have a quick question which I'm going to ask Mr. Baker, which I'm assuming your presentation, probably your deputation, relates to the last presentation and not to the archaeology, or do you want to ask something about archaeology? Central area as a whole. Okay, so I suggest we take it at the end. There's an awful lot in that presentation, so I'm thinking that it might be helpful that if people have questions on what we've covered so far, now's the time to ask it, rather than trying to remember all the final details and then come back to it later on. So I just wondered if colleagues had questions. Yeah, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. The next steps, there are some elapsed times, but not indicative dates. And I'm wondering when the final archaeology panel might be held, and more generally, what the relationship is between this archaeology process and the ability to begin construction work on the site.
Okay, well, as I said, we'll do an initial sort of interim broad brush. This is what we found, what we think currently within a month. The detailed report is due 6 months after the completion of field work, and I think also related to the developer agreement, which takes us to sort of late summer. We've talked internally, and we anticipate that sort of public forum full-on presentation about the archaeology of this site from these trenches would happen close to or around that period of that report, because obviously we would want the full information to present to the public. Obviously there are things in the political world that may change that sort of thing, so but we are looking at for the delivery of that detailed report within sort of late summer, so I'm sure that we'll be able to give an update on when that final sort of panel presentation will happen in due course, but that may be affected by wider events. In terms of your second question about how that relates to the development, this is very much an evaluation. It's starting to look at what's there. The next steps really will be for Jigsaw and the project team to sort of start the pre-application process really and engage through planning, and there'll be a lot more detailed discussions about what we do know, what might happen where, and therefore where or what further information might we need, etc. So that's all the sort of next stages in terms of the planning sort of process really. I hope that answers your question.
I think Councillor Edwards, just to add to that, the development brief that went out and the procurement papers that went out, very specific archaeology strategy, which obviously Tracy oversaw. The Jigsaw team are here today. They're well aware of that, and I think so joining the two up is already happening along the way behind.
Councillor Promotion.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Edwards has asked the question I was thinking about there in terms of timeline. But I'm just curious, really, where is all this work happening, all the processing of the finds, and to what extent are the public or local experts involved in that processing of all those finds?
At this stage, a lot of that processing work is happening at Pre-Construct's office in North Winchester. And as you see from the photograph, there's a lot of local volunteers who are helping with that. Initially, I think some of them are a bit bored of washing animal bone, but that's what lots has been found. So, but they get lots of other treat finds to look at as well. A lot of the Preconstruct is a multi-office organisation, and their main office is in London, South East London, and a lot of their specialists work out of that office. So, but there's also lots of other external specialists who will be brought in by Preconstruct to look at specific elements of some of the finds from the site. So, you know, leather experts, they're fairly few and far between. So they tend to be used by all the archaeological contractors, but Preconstruct have certainly set in place, you know, we need you here. They're all set and ready to go. So so some of that, a lot of that specialist review of the material will happen not in Winchester, but it'll all be brought back. And our hope is, and I've talked to Preconstruct about that before, is to sort of have a sort of fora officer specialist contractor forage to look at how that story is evolving and just discuss, you know, the borehole results. That will involve Keith Wilkinson from the University of Winchester, we hope, etc. So yeah.
Thank you. So it's a little bit like trying to organise all your tradespeople in on a building project. You just hope they're all going to turn up at the right.
Preconstruct have got a lot of scheduling ahead in advance so that there are no delays.
I'm just curious, is this place a place that could accept visitors to come and have a look and be shown, okay, this is what we're doing and so on, or was that just a very scary proposition?
The office in Winchester is pretty small, and certainly I don't think it's suitable for public sort of viewing of that. Once the material's been processed, and a lot has already, it will go off to their London office and then for work on by the specialists externally as well. So that's probably not something that we could provide direct facilitation to view or understand, but I certainly hope and that there'll be further updates on anything, you know, if for example some of the material being looked at produces a really interesting fact or information, we'd certainly be looking to kind of provide regular updates through the social media platforms during this post-excavation process.
Bolton, did you want to ask a question?
Just that I think we're all curious along similar sort of lines here, and the only two sort of outstanding bits for me were, I was curious to know sort of how many people you have working on the digs. Was it like a 7 hour a day, 5 day a week exploit? And secondly, I appreciate that we're in the final throes of all of that part of the project. And in the absence of a last minute discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, would anything get in the way of sort of the next stage in terms of development? Thank you.
In terms of a working day, yes, it's a 5 day a week, bar the open days, which are on Saturdays. The team on site, in each trench, you'll have restrictions as to space and capacity. So I think it varied from 3, 4, 5 people in the trench. They all had to have confined spaces training. You had a permanent person at trench top undertaking the gas monitoring, making sure everyone is safe, and that's a permanent. They are there. That they've been sat there for months and haven't done any digging. Then you have the site supervisors on site as well, and then you have the project management team back at the office and visiting and discussing strategy with myself and the site team. It's an 8 till 4 working day, but as I said, to get to site, you've got to dewater the trench first, take back the silt layer that's accumulated overnight. So and then at sort of 3:30 you've got to start packing up the equipment, etc. So and obviously light through the winter months has been obviously an issue in terms of packing up as well. So that's the sort of general setup in terms of a working pattern. I'm sorry, your second point. We certainly haven't found the Ark of the Covenant, no. The archaeology is incredibly exciting and interesting, but we haven't got anything that we can point to as being massively significant. We haven't got a mosaic. There's been a couple of pieces of tessera in later deposits, but no intact mosaics, no firm, beautiful Roman building, lots of remains of things, and we will build up a really exciting picture, but there's no showstopper as yet been identified on the site.
Mr. Woolgar, I think you wanted to either comment or ask a question. Feel free to.
I was just going to chip in on the substructure archaeological challenges point, which was sort of mentioned a little earlier. And we have worked with PCA actually in the past in a very challenging location in Bermondsey. And the solution in that instance was actually a combination of sort of cantilevered ground floor slabs. So you have your piles in locations that aren't sensitive, cantilevering slabs away from any of the archaeological remains. And interestingly, in that particular instance in Bermondsey Square, we had a large glazed panel in the floor to actually expose some of the remains, which are still visible to this day when you go into the commercial space in that area.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions from anyone? Oh, Councillor Godfrey.
Is this the right meeting? The question I asked this morning, the wrong time back, can we confirm that the direct development agreement with Jigsaw is? Oh, right, I'm sorry, I was.
Archaeology section.
Oh, if that's all we're doing with it.
Yeah, I just thought while we had Ms. Matthews here, then we would do that in detail, and then we'll come back to that question in a minute. So no, that was extremely helpful. Thank you very much indeed. I'm looking forward to hearing more about. I mean, I've got questions, but they're really about the archaeology, and I'll get a chance to do that when we have the panel. Like, you know, we had a very exciting, well, exciting to some of us, launch last night of the latest book in the Winchester Excavations Committee series about Roman Winchester. So, which presented some things that genuinely, I think none of us knew, like Winchester being the largest, what was the phrase he used? The largest walled fort in England or something. I mean, in Antonine period or something like that.
The largest Flavian urban centre.
There were various
Flavian
things.
being very early 1st century, soon after the Roman conquest.
I think what was interesting about it was I think we always assumed that we were kind of just another Roman city. And what's clear from the publication last night is we weren't. We often in this city have long discussions about the Anglo-Saxons, but actually what's clear from this publication, available from all good bookshops at a really quite eye-watering price, but you can pay for a PDF, is that actually our Roman history is equally important as well. So I could ask all kinds of questions about, you know, how old was the Roman stuff, and I also share your excitement that actually discovering a working part of the city and where things were made and done is actually just as important as any other part of the city that we find, and so getting insight onto that is incredibly important, and also the city's complex, as we are now discovering, more complicated relationship with water and the river than perhaps we realised. So lots of exciting things. Thank you very much indeed for giving us the update. We'll now move on to the next presentation, which is from Jigsaw. Yeah, about the project overall.
Thank you very much. What I will set out here is just a brief summary across our sort of two approaches when it comes to engagement. We have our active engagement and we have our passive engagement. Active engagement is actually going out, meeting people, reaching out directly, whereas our passive is primarily digital, is where people come to us. So the first slide here is just around the series of meet and greets that we ran from October to December. There were 6 or 7 in total, I think, with a total of 142 attendees. I think it's fair to say that it was worthwhile as an experience, and you can see some of the key themes coming out of there: overriding interest around movement and transport, but also some interesting discussions around housing concerns and mix of uses. You know, some ideas there which perhaps we didn't expect to be brought to us from members of the public, which was good. 142 people turning up to a meet and greet isn't enough in our view, and we want to meet more people. So we are already in the throes of our next round, or setting up our next round of, and you know, we're moving around our terminology slightly because we're calling these ones pop-ups, and it is very much that. One of the things we learned from the meet and greets was actually positioning ourselves in a, you know, somewhere where there is potential for incidental sort of contact, i.e. people just walking by, works really nicely. People might not have time to book out their day, but if they're walking past and they can grab 5 minutes just to chat to you, it works quite nicely. So we've got locations across Marwell Zoo, hopefully the cathedral, going back to the leisure centre at the right time, with the Arc and Rugby Club, as well as making sure we have a presence at the upcoming Global Galaxies event on Middlebrook Street. The content of that, again, is around trying to get people's opinion, ask an opportunity to discuss their concerns, and we're going to be asking those that come and see us and talk to us to literally send your ideas on a postcard. So we'll be handing out postcards to members of the public so that they can respond to us, with the incentive off the back of it that we'll run a little prize draw at the end of it and offer a family ticket to go to 878 AD. That's our sort of our immediate plan for meet and greet. We're conscious that we have the pre-election period coming up, so this is all due to take place in the next 6 weeks. And actually our sort of public engagement, certainly the active element of the public engagement, will resume after publication of the development delivery plan, which we will come on to later in this presentation. Thank you. So that was the active. This is the passive. Commonplace has continued to tick away in the background. It has been pushed through both Commonplace's mailing list and registered list, which are people that have already kind of signed up to Winchester. Anything that's happening on Commonplace within Winchester, so it's been pushed through them, and there's 1,000 invites gone out there. It's also been featured within the Winchester newsletter, with 18,000 recipients of that, as well as 700 individuals that are specifically registered to hear about CWR as a project. That being said, we look at the number of visitors, the number of subscribers, and those answering the demographic questions, and actually we need to reach more people. So whilst it tells us some interesting things around sustainability, integration and permeability, those sorts of elements, there's lots of commonality in responses that we get from people on Commonplace. It tells us a bit, but it doesn't feel as though we've got to enough people to really kind of get the weight of that yet. And I think the way that we will improve those numbers will be around enhancing the digital offer and actually creating something that people are interested in coming and seeing. And I'll talk about that a little bit because that's the last slide. The next steps, so this is really just setting out the process of us coming back in June with a view to trying to finalise our development delivery plan. The development delivery plan is the end product of a process. So, you know, our guiding light when it comes to the tender was a combination of the development brief, the SPD, movement strategy, and then there are a couple of pages of other documents to reference within the development brief. And those are our kind of our Bible. That's led to our tender, but the contents of the development delivery plan will be assessed against the contents and the guidance within the development brief. So that's very much our primary focus over the next 6 months. And you can see the chapters on the right hand side there. There's a lot in it with regards to design, our approach to the mixed use quarter, our approach to high quality public realm and placemaking, our approach to estate management, how we expect the differing functions across the estate to perform and interact. We will also set out some findings from our community engagement to date, but also set out our approach for community and stakeholder engagement as we work up the actual designs following the development delivery plan being published. We will set out our approach to sustainability, and a lot of that will focus around the Igloo footprint principles. We will set out our approach to social value, likely to be started from indicating a social value baseline and building up from there. We will set out our strategy around meanwhile uses, and that's very much an iterative process idea where we'll be indicating where we think that there are opportunities for intervention. We don't want to just sit here and work up a planning application in the background. Actually, we think that there are opportunities to get on and do things in an iterative way, and that will be set out within our meanwhile use strategy. Planning strategy, partnering and procurement strategy. I sense I probably don't need to read them all out, but you can see that there's a lot of content here, and this is exactly what we'll be bringing back in June. Keep looking at my screen, it's actually up there. So yeah, just how does that look on a roadmap? We very much a focus of the next 6 weeks around the pop-ups, as well as reaching out more to youth groups and younger people. We in collaboration with Winchester officers, we've identified around about 35, 36 different organisations that would be really helpful for us to engage with. We're in contact with, well, we've contacted all of them, and we're engaging with at least 10 of those now to set up bespoke workshops that specifically target the youth. The intent there is that we form a youth group which are there to sort of hold us to account over the course of the process, together with a futures group which will be formed with other stakeholders, again to hold us to account to the commitments that we set out within the development delivery plan. We have resequenced our strategy to place the co-creation workshops, which we were hoping to get done early this year. We've resequenced those now to sit just at the other side of the pre-election period, and we think it's actually quite opportune, given that we're going to be meeting more people over the course of the next few months anyway, and keen to have as many people participating in those co-creation workshops as possible. And then we're into publication of the development delivery plan. So the last thing here, I had hoped to give a bit of a sneak peek of this, but I have to admit I think technology is going to beat me. What you're seeing on screen there is on the right hand side. This is a photometric model which has been built of Winchester. It's a little bit like Google Maps, except for it's incredibly high resolution. It is entirely possible to sort of effectively walk through the city as it is now, and this was a series of photographs that were put together in about October, November last year. But on the left, you have the scale model from the City of Winchester Museum, which we have now also been in and undertaken a photometric scan of. And similarly to Google Maps, you can now walk through that as though it was 1870. And so when I talk about wanting to enhance the digital offering in order to get more engagement through our passive means, this is what I mean. I think by creating something that is interesting to people, as a minimum, oh, I want to go and see where my house is. Oh, wouldn't it be interesting to see what was where my house is in 1870? You know, as a minimum, it's that. But we're going to continue to sort of build on the engagement platform in ways like this to try and bring people to us. There are other many things that we could do with these two models, and I think something that I really enjoy is this idea of creating a narrative, and I think that it's going to be really wonderful to look at the development and place it within its context of a 150-year history as we go through the planning process. I think that's probably it from me.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. Questions? Oh, sorry, public participation. Well, after all this, I've been carefully saying to Mr. Baker, are you ready? Can you hold off? And we finally get to the time where it's your turn to come forward. Mr. Baker, would you please come forward and make your comments or ask any questions?
Richard Baker, City of Winchester Trust. I have one question. Has the council signed a contract with Jigsaw to develop and complete the regeneration of the central area?
This is Amy.
Thank you. The answer to the question is yes, the council has signed the contract and it's been sealed. Jigsaw have also sent their versions, and they're to use the house analogy. If you sell a house, we've exchanged, but we haven't yet completed. So we're due any day.
Could I ask supplementary? Do you have a time limit for completion?
For an open and involving council. So in this occasion, absolutely. What's your question?
Is that the time?
Is there a
how long is it going to
timetable
take
for
to complete?
completion?
Oh, is there a time limit?
I'm looking to my Jigsaw colleagues, but we're expecting days, not weeks. And you're nodding, so we're all expecting days, not weeks.
I think we've sort of got through the point of the lawyers having their arguments, and now we're in the paperwork. No, the discussions are all over, so everything is sorted out, and we are literally in the grinding process. Both sides have agreed, and we're now just stamping the bits of paper and signing the bits of paper, and sorry, they're signing the bits of paper. We've exchanged. We're going to complete. Essentially, that's the best way of thinking about it. What? A bit more than that. Thank you for your question. So, the right answer, I hope. Very good. It's the one we were all hoping for, and we now have. Good. So, Councillor Godfrey is obviously he's done now. So, but I'm sure you will have some other good questions. Who else has some questions, colleagues? Councillor Lerney.
Yeah, has anything come out of the consultation and engagement that you've done so far that's been surprising, or has it all aligned with all the previous work that the council's done?
The honest answer is there's a lot of alignment. I think there's one thing which I found interesting was I had a conversation, and I guess a lot of this stuff does become anecdotal when you're talking in relatively low numbers, and so these are sort of anecdotal feedback from a couple of the meet and greets. There were a couple of people that I spoke to who were more keen than I might have expected to create purpose-built student housing in the centre, which wasn't on my radar. But like I say, that's a couple of people out of all of the various people that we've met. So that slightly surprised me. I would say the majority of the conversations and feedback that we've had are in accordance with the message that we've had over the course of the last few years.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. Right at the end of the presentation, you talked about setting up a youth group, and I just wondered whether you could shed a bit of light on how you propose to do that, and sort of how will it meet and how will it inform plans going forward?
Absolutely. So we've started the process. So I suppose in a sense I've got an answer to the first part of the question, perhaps not all of it. We want the process to be organic, in that we want to be guided by the professionals that work with those particular groups, rather than for us as a developer to turn around and set a process that governs them that might not work. It's very much a case of us initially meeting with the groups that are coming back to us that we've approached. We'll set out a workshop in that complements a process with them. From there, we'll start to identify individuals, groups that are particularly engaged and want to continue to be engaged. But beyond that, the formality and the manner in which they sort of monitor and comment is not yet set. I think it's open to be shaped.
Are these groups from schools or colleges, universities?
Yes, we've gone quite broad, so it's all the way down to primary school and up.
Councillor Croydon. Councillor Thompson's sort of delved into an area I was interested in. I'm sort of building on that. I'm sort of wondering, what are you hoping that these youth organisations will input into the project? And kind of beyond the youth area, I'm just wondering, how do you sell the idea of engaging, putting the time into coming along to engage with you, to provide input? Because I can sort of sense that you're kind of hoping for a little bit more, and I just wonder if it's just too abstract for folks to get their heads around, to then think, okay, and then of course you end up with certain demographics who've got more time on their hands can do it, and then the really busy people tend not to have the time, and it's just a little bit, abstract and difficult to get head around. How do you kind of overcome that? And I guess related to that, have you got any advice, any asks of councillors to kind of try and encourage people?
Thank you. To take the first question with regards to the youth, I think, and again, I don't want to sort of preempt the process, but I think that I'm kind of expecting the workshops that we have to be very centered around creativity. They'll be quite practical, possibly art driven, and lots of fun ideas can come out of that sort of process. I don't know what they'll be, but they will be shared widely. And I think it's that fresh perspective kind of thinking, a different way of thinking comes from a primary school kid than it does from everybody else. In terms of additional engagement, I think you're right around the concept being too abstract and therefore not engaging people. I think it's fair to say that a few people have turned up at the meet and greets and said, well, I thought I was going to see some designs. But actually we would have failed if the first time we've had a conversation with somebody is the time that we're showing them a design. And that is really what we're trying to achieve here, is this reaching out to people to try and feed in their concerns and their hopes for the development right at the very beginning, rather than simply creating a straw man design, throwing it out there and expecting it to be torn to shreds. It's not the way that we like to work. We want to work with people on the journey.
I understand that it's a chicken and egg kind of thing of, I'm sure when whatever is done is fully implemented, there'll be all sorts of opinions, and some of them will be highly critical, and you'll be thinking, I wish you'd engaged earlier on and get that point out then. But it is tricky. But it's not even on paper, it's more about concepts and frameworks and stuff.
I think a regular drumbeat of us being present publicly and inviting people to come and talk to us, I think is probably a good way for us to, and whilst I talk about sort of tranches of engagement, the truth is we won't stop. we're always here to discuss with members of the public and any other stakeholder. And yeah, so it's an ongoing process, I suppose.
Thank you very much, and I agree with your points about the primary school children. I've been interviewed by David Dimbleby, and I've been interviewed by primary school children, and I know which was harder. Any other questions that people might have? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. This could be just a clarification, really. Sometimes I get a bit boggled by terminology. And so when you say the detailed design plan by sort of June 2020, you've already switched your microphone on. Is that the same as a master plan? And is that what would go to the council? Or I just wanted a bit of clarity about what all that means. All right.
So the DDP, the Development Delivery Plan, yes, that is a series of strategies that we're committed to produce as a part of the development agreement. It isn't a master plan. It is a refresh and enhancement of design principles and a framework for us to operate within. It will largely take the form of a detailed design brief for our designers to operate within effectively, as supplemented by a series of other strategies. There are elements around infrastructure. How are we going to power the site? What are we going to do about the culvert? All of these sorts of things will be contained within it, but will it be a master plan that sets out exactly where buildings are? No. And I guess the follow-up is, well, when will we see that? I would expect, so we'll be launching into what's called RIBA stage 1 immediately following the approval of the development delivery plan, and I would expect a master plan to take shape in the early part of that process. So if we say 6 months to the development delivery plan, we're sort of talking 9 to 12 months to a master plan. Yeah.
Terrifyingly exciting. Councillor Croyson.
Yeah, that's helpful to know, and I think Councillor Bolton was on the same track as me as to, okay, what so just bringing it back to specifics, I think this is probably a question for Mr. Bakey. I'll just make sure I've got your eye. Hi, Ken. I think I've got a question which is more for you, I think, but you may that or someone else. I think in your right at the start of this introduction, you were talking about the progress with the Friarsgate area, and just bringing this back to relating this to the fact that sometimes some of this work is a little bit conceptual and abstract. The public is always very interested in what you can see, feel, and touch, and it feels to me like the meanwhile use thing that's going to happen on Friarsgate is going to be a real tangible thing that we're, the folks can see, they can have comments on and so on. I'm just wondering if you just remind us of the dates, but also just give us some idea, if you can, describe what we're going to see when the soft landscaping and so on has been done and it's open and people can engage with it. Just remind us what that will look like if you could. And I know you haven't probably got the content to be able to put it up on the slide and show us.
I'm going to defer to Varian because she's been learning and reading this for the last however many years. But before she does, I suppose the one thing that's interesting just to say for the committee is the development delivery plan. When Jigsaw present that to us, we will be taking that back to Cabinet for approval. And so that will be, we are aiming for a July Cabinet date. And as Matt described, it will set out a series of issues that the council wanted further work on, and also demonstrate how Jigsaw will be approaching more before they start doing detailed design and spending quite a lot of money. So that will come back to Cabinet once it's been submitted. I think there is an interesting one before we talk about maybe the specific Friarsgate is once they're into that detailed design process, actually there'll be I think it's easier to engage people when they have something to look at then, rather than abstract concepts. Dare I say, without committing them to making a model, there's enough models in Manchester maybe, but you know there are well tried and trusted methods of actually engaging people using visual means, either on a screen or with a physical model, to demonstrate what something is actually going to look like in the future. And I'm sure that will all form part of their submission as part of the development delivery plan, about the details of what that engagement might then look like as well. But Friarsgate, Verwyn, we did share, we could circulate the designs for soft landscaping and interpretive facilities, but you can maybe describe it as well.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, so with regards to Friarsgate, as we said, we've got the hard landscaping moving into the soft landscaping. The aim is to have that completed by summer. So it hopefully, depending on weather and depending on we don't come across anything else unexpected. And what we're currently doing is working with the team from PCA, so the archaeology team, because the first part of that engagement and opening up of that site will be to do sort of more an engagement, come and have a go at digging on an archaeological type of experience, quite shallow, quite come and have a go for a short period of time, with a view to giving a bit of a heads up as to maybe what might be there, but it's mainly to get people to come in and be engaged and get excited about the project. And leading on from that, there will be space within the Friarsgate site, and we can redistribute the proposals for the site, is space for, there's a small platform stroke stage, so we could get art groups, creative groups, drama groups to come in and do some form of performance. There's space to do art. There's space to drive in and bring in vehicles. So, for example, one of the archaeology ideas was to have like a time truck or an exhibition. So at the moment, it's a bit fluid. We haven't identified exactly what that might be. But again, working with Matt and Warwick and the team at Jigsaw, it is a really good opportunity to bring them in on that, to start further engaging across the wider projects and how all of that comes together, because obviously it's holding the fort for them until they're ready to start the bigger scheme on that site. So we're working very closely with them on that at the moment, how we integrate that more fully.
Okay, that's helpful. So sort of use the opportunity that will come from having that area opening up and engaging with people who might use it, to then sort of draw them more into the more strategic long-term ideas development. So that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
And it's quite exciting walking past the site now. You can see across it, you can see the beautiful almshouse chimneys. It's just changed the whole outlook as you come into that, and we're hoping that once the work is completed, the hoardings come down, and it absolutely enhances that area and starts to give people a reason to go down there.
Thank you. And that actually ties into a question I've got, which of course one of the consequences of it will change the nature of movement in the area, and slightly referring back to the question that was asked by Councillor Lee, who the area of discussion, which is, again, I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyway, so we have it on the record, which is, you know, how are you coordinating so that you're coordinated with Hampshire, you're coordinated for kind of movement and other questions that we have within the city, and indeed you're coordinated with, you know, colleagues from Design Engine that we met earlier, so that between us all we have a coherent story in terms of how people move about and use the city.
I think it's as simple an answer as that Design Engine joined the working group for movement and meet regularly. That's essentially, yeah, I think that's it.
Includes Hampshire and includes the officers involved in the movement strategy. Okay.
Correct.
Good. Are there any other questions? Any debate? Yeah.
Not really debate, just a few comments really. I think it's really great to see the progress, and you know, I think we can generally start getting a bit excited about all of this. I mean, obviously the actual development still seems quite a way in the distance, but great that Friarsgate is now, you know, down by all intents and purposes, something that I've been telling residents, and you know, that this was going to happen for at least the last 3 years. So that is fantastic progress. And as Miss Lyons has said, it really opens up the vistas and makes a huge difference. That and I think it, you know, having that down, and once it's got the hard landscaping and then the meanwhile use, it will be, it shows real progress and real commitment to the development that is going to take place in the next few years. So I'm really getting quite excited that, you know, the beginning is in sight, if you like. Thank you.
I think it has been very frustrating from the outside to the public and to members, and it seems as though things have taken a long time, and they have. But invariably, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. We've been working very hard on all aspects of the project, and I think it's only once there's something tangible on the ground. It's very difficult when it's just a blank sheet of paper to get people to engage, to really get them to start to say something, because what they want to do is comment on something rather than hypotheticals. And I'm sure now there's actual activity on site and things are really starting to motor, that we'll get that much better engagement. I'm sure that's the case.
Slightly lost control of the meeting, but very far away.
And I think that's absolutely right, Warwick. Thank you, Chair. Seeing the difference that the work that the council's done with the tenants on King's Walk, the transformation at King's Walk has been phenomenal. And I think there's real buzz around King's Walk now. And I think, as you say, Councillor Thompson, with Friarsgate coming down and the next steps, there is remarkable change now. And I think it is time for maybe a little bit of cautious optimism here. You know, it is going to happen. We've got the team in, they're here all the time, really working on it, and I think things will really start to progress quite quickly now.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think the combination of conversations we've had today about Friarsgate, about the archaeology, I'm glad you mentioned King's Walk. You know, the things that are already happening physically on the ground is very exciting. But I think what's also clear is that we're motoring ahead with the next stage in terms of defining the plan, moving towards the master plan, and you know, things are going to move at pace to get to and how we involve people in that journey, which is so important, and how we work with the people and businesses and other organisations of Winchester to make that project special. We're at a very exciting time, and thank you for all the work and the partnership that we get from our friends at Jigsaw and all the work that's been done by officers. And I'm looking forward genuinely to the next meeting and the progress that I'm sure we will be reporting at that point as well. So on that note, we're asked to note the report. I'm taking that as well. Yep, noted. We have reached the end of our agenda. Thank you everybody who's attended. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your pithy and to the point question, which proved very useful and put us on a very good basis for discussion. Thank you everybody for coming, and I declare the meeting closed.